Welcome to the Genesis of the Doctor podcast, where we're taking a journey through the time and space of the history of Doctor Who. I'm Joy.
And I'm Tris.
And for today's episode, we will be starting Season 2 of Doctor Who, with the first two serials being The Planet of Giants and The Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Woo.
Now, I would like to just start with a couple mentions of stuff for The Planet of Giants, because last time I said this is like a reworked script from the first season, which is not exactly true. Like the first serial was going to be called The Giants, and it was going to be about them shrinking, but this script is actually just like a completely different script entirely.
Oh, okay.
The idea for the first one would have been that they went to Coal Hill School and were shrunk there, and they were interacting with students and stuff. But David Whittaker, who's the story editor, just really liked the idea of them shrinking, so he just got a different script to be written they eventually got to do.
I see. Got to work
and
with
then
the same
also,
idea, but yeah.
Yeah, and then also, there is a 4-episode version of this serial, which I found online, I will say. Like Tubi TV and BBC iPlayer only have a 3-episode version. So what happened was they originally recorded a 4-episode version, and then they had to cut it down to 3 episodes. So the 3rd and 4th episode became 1. And then in, I think, 2012, when they did the DVD release, they did their best to make it back into the 4-episode version by taking the script, and I will say they didn't really have any good footage, but they did their best.
Yeah, how was that? I didn't get to check out the 4-episode version. I just stuck with the 3-episode version, but how was that?
I mean, like, as I said, they had, like, no footage to really work with, so They just had a lot of weird camera angles and stuff of, like, very close-ups on characters' faces where you didn't even see their mouth moving and stuff. So, it was weird. I mean, they did get back William Russell and Carol Ann Ford to reprise their roles, which is neat.
That is neat.
Even if they sounded very different.
Yeah. That is actually pretty neat, but
I would say, in general, it doesn't really add much, because it kind of just makes all the scenes a bit longer. Yeah. There's like a couple plot points. There's a couple plot points that are a bit better, but otherwise you're not really missing much if you just watch a 3-episode version.
Yeah, I was going to say, from everything we see in Planet of the Giants, from what you can normally view, I don't feel like much was missed with combining episodes 3 and 4 into one episode. I don't feel like there was a lot missed. I feel like some of the flaws with the story are more so as a whole and not solely from combining those episodes.
Yeah.
Like,
I did like how creative they were with this episode, where like it starts off as just like a typical like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but then it's a murder scene that they have to try to get this guy to not get away with murder, which is an interesting way to take that.
Yeah, I think this this serial was very clear that they wanted to have some fun set design. And I think this is some of the best set design they've had on the show thus far. Like, there's some really cool things that they do here. Like, some cool things that they made for, them to pretend to be tiny in. And then, like, the bugs. And there was a lot of cool things that they did that made it feel like they were really trying to have a good time with the set and show, like, hey, we have a somewhat bigger budget now than we did before.
Yeah. Apparently, this is also... They had to get, like, a different set to be able to do something like this, because the reason why they didn't do the Giants was that they weren't able to really film, like, wide-angle shots at the old set. So they got, like, a new set and everything.
Okay.
That's how they did it.
Okay. I will say the premise to this entire episode, or rather not the premise, the reason behind this episode of something goes wrong in the TARDIS, like something just like overheats or something, is kind of funny.
Yeah, it is.
It reminded me a little bit of, you have the episode, I think it's called Flatline, in, I believe, season 8, where, or like modern Doctor Who series 8, where the Doctor inside the shrinking TARDIS and Clara's out in the open pretending to be him, essentially, or trying to figure things out. That's kind of the closest we've had to this otherwise, and they had a more sci-fi reasoning for why it was shrinking, whereas this made it seem like, the TARDIS is really dangerous if you don't operate it right.
Yeah. you can kind of tell they wanted to have them shrink, and they didn't really care that much about the explanation.
Mm-hmm. There were some interesting things in this episode that I think were kind of funny in retrospect. Like, I think the whole murder plot, for example, it was interesting watching that unfold. But correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the TARDIS team actually did anything that helped them solve that murder. I think it was just coincidence.
Yeah, they kind of didn't. I feel like having the phone off the hook kind of made the people a bit, like the operator, a bit more suspicious.
But she was already suspicious, is the funny thing. Like, she was already suspicious of it.
Yeah, they kind of didn't really do anything. They tried their best to do something, but I guess technically at the end, Forrester was going to probably kill Smithers, so they kind of stopped that part. But otherwise, he would have gotten caught anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
It was mostly the operator. The operator is the one that was like, "Hey, this guy sounds literally exactly the same. He's not even masking his voice very well."
It was really funny how he's like, "What's he doing to mask his voice?" He's holding He's holding like a napkin or like a handkerchief to his mouth, and like changing how he enunciates his words. But that's it. Yep. Like this man was not very good at trying to hide that he murdered someone.
Yeah, he wasn't. I think that there were funny cliffhangers in this too, where it's like, hey, the cat shows up and it's going to fight them, and then 2 seconds into the next episode, the cat's not a problem anymore.
Yep.
And then the sink getting drained is going to kill them, and it's just 2 seconds into it, it's like, oh no, we're just going to step over here and we're fine now.
Yeah, as long as the sink doesn't overflow. I like that. It really does look like the actors had fun navigating like the set. Like, it seems like they had fun with it, but this is such a nonsense story, to be honest.
Yeah,
like
it is,
like the murder really didn't matter to them too much. I did like the idea of sound, because that's something I've never really thought of how like they're so small they won't hear things at the right frequency, and they won't be heard at the right frequency either. Because most things that involve shrinking never consider anything like that.
Yeah, they don't.
So I thought that was actually pretty cool. I was like, wow, that actually feels like they're bringing proper science into this. That's pretty neat. But then all of that is kind of overshadowed by the rather silly pesticide plot of...
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bunch of, like, everyone's like dying, or all these things are dying. It's so weird. Let's investigate. Oh, there's these like seeds up here. They smell kind of funny. Barbara immediately grabs one, and behind Ian, like no one looking at her. Well, I wouldn't touch these. They might be part of an experiment. And then like a whole episode and a half of Barbara being like, no, what? Slightly rubbing her hands to try to get it off.
She almost dies because she refused to tell anyone that she had touched it.
Which was weird. I don't really get why she didn't. It kind of felt like, at come this point, Barbara has done so much and has been so well-defined as a character. They wanted to give her Susan's kind of role of the one in danger and the one that's not doing as much. That this is what they came up with. And it just felt a bit out of character for her to not be mentioning the problems, and to not be, I mean, to only be concerned about it for herself, but not like to anyone else. And then the solution is the solution goes against all the rest of the science in the episode.
Well, they did that. They did explain that a bit better in the 4-episode version.
Oh, did they?
They said that like when they're growing back into normal size, it's like the seed. They say it like the seed's molecules were stable, so it stayed small when they grew.
Had to do with
so
stability.
Then that kind of explains like why the poison stays small when they grow as well.
Okay.
It's
okay, because without that explanation,
the molecules were unstable of the people.
Okay.
Which is what the explanation is.
Okay, the instability actually does help a little bit, because otherwise it is really funny to look at it as, oh, let's bring this seed into the TARDIS and we'll regrow to normal size, but the seed will shrink. It's like, wait, no, hold on. If the seed is inside the TARDIS, it should now be a comically large seed in reality, like outside the TARDIS too. Like if it's traveling in the TARDIS. But okay, if it has to do with the molecules, I say that like it's an actual scientific proof, but like at least there's an attempt to explain it in that case, because otherwise, it was really silly and didn't actually make much sense.
There's a couple other moments in the 4-episode version too that kind of help. Like Barbara she insists that they have to stop the villain before they go back to the TARDIS. So like, after she collapses, everybody wants to bring her back to the TARDIS, but she's like, no, we have to figure this thing out and get the guy arrested.
Yeah.
And then there's also, if you know when Smithers and Forrester go back to the shed and they investigate the telephone, Smithers is like, hey, there's like DN6 here. And they don't really explain in the 3-episode version what he's talking about there.
No, they don't.
Turns out, in the 4-episode version, it's because the cat jumped up on the table and died because it had exposed itself to the DN6.
Oh.
Yes. So in that scene, he's supposed to find the cat and go like, why is the cat covered in DN6? And then he goes outside and examines. It's like, oh, it kills literally everything. And that's when he has his moment of realizing, I created something very terrible.
Yeah, because he definitely. I was curious about that because he completely changed his stance in the middle of the serial. Otherwise, he goes on about how like the research must continue and I must keep going on this because I think we really have something here. Into, oh God, we can't keep going on this. It's terrible. This thing's what was it? This is worse than radiation. I think is what he said.
Yeah, it's funny that like he's the one making it and he like never tested it, I guess, until right now.
So weird.
Like now he's realizing how bad it is, and he was the one making it. So like that's not very good science, there, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of funny how this episode had some really good science and then some very questionable science, like in the same episode. If it was one or the other, that'd be one thing. But the fact that this one episode had both is just kind of funny.
Yeah, I did find it so funny how confident Forrester was when he was like on the phone and everything. He was like, no, we're all good. Like they all believe me.
and it's so funny because he outed himself too, talking about how like, oh yeah, I mean he's going to be on a boat for several weeks and he's crossing over into France tonight. It's like, well, you shouldn't be calling back and answering back then because you shouldn't have access to a phone.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
And then his plan is to like put him in the boat and then make the boat capsize. And like, they're probably going to, if they find the body, they will see there's a bullet wound in it.
Yeah.
So they will question stuff again.
He clearly didn't think that through very much. No, he is pretty stupid.
I enjoyed this though, because I think it's an interesting way to take a shrinking story.
It is.
So like it's a very fun idea.
Yeah, fun is the best way to describe it, I think. Like, this was a really fun episode. Like, the set design was honestly probably, like, the spotlight, in my opinion. The set design was so good for the time and selling you on what it all actually was.
Yeah. And
it seems like they had a lot of fun making this. It's just, it's a little too goofy in certain aspects.
Yeah.
I feel that element of it needs to be a little bit criticized. But that's all, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess they kind of did their best with their low budget, too, because, like, they show an ant, but the ant doesn't move because it's dead. And, like, the only time they try something like that is with the fly. They have a fly that, like, actually moves and is alive for a moment.
And then it immediately dies upon touching the seeds.
Yeah.
That whole first bit, though, like, was actually, like, really good. Like, you had the giant bee, you had the giant ant, you had the ant eggs, you had the worm. Like, the way they had everything there, I think was actually, like, pretty cool.
And I liked how, like, when they were explaining stuff, they were swapping back between the Doctor explaining it to Barbara and Susan explaining it to Ian.
Yeah, I did really
interesting
like that.
Little.
I had that in my notes here. That this was a good episode of showing Susan can be as smart as the Doctor, which is good because she's also a Time Lord.
And they kind of do make her yelling a plot point because she yells in the sink.
Yep.
That scene was funny though because it's like she's yelling like, "Hey, Ian and Barbara, do you want to mention where you are so they just know where to go?" She never says that.
Helpful.
That'd probably be helpful.
I'm also surprised the Doctor was able to climb up the drain. To be honest, like, that must have been a long distance. Yeah. I'm surprised he was able to do it. Oh, you know what? I have one criticism in here. I'm just like scrolling through my notes. The jump from when Ian got taken away to not inside yet, but when he was like brought to where the body was and separated from the whole group, the cut to just they're back with him and talking about, like, they're just talking about everything that just happened. There was no fanfare. There was no like reunion scene. They made it sound like, and it was in like the very first episode, they made it sound like needing to get everyone back together was like going to be the big plot point, but it was such a big distance. But no, they just got to Ian right before the cat found them, and just no problem, no fanfare. It felt like they cut scenes there. It was a little strange.
Yeah. I feel like they kind of do that a lot in Doctor Who so far, where it's just like, what you think is going to end up being a plot point ends up not being it, and then they spend a lot more time on another plot point.
Yeah, they've definitely done that a bit, but it's funny because that did become the plot point for starting the second episode. Where they did get separated and have to meet back up. So it's like, why not make that first part actually part of it?
Yeah. And Ian has a terrible choice of where he hides every single time.
It's really funny. That persists
not even
in
just
both
in this
of these
episode
serials.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah. In both of them, he always picks the worst spot to hide.
It's actually really funny. This man is terrible at hide and seek.
Yep. First he hides in a cigarette case, and then he hides in the briefcase.
And then he hides in a bomb, but that's different.
Yeah.
We'll get to that one.
Yeah, I think this serial was pretty fun, but it certainly had issues, but it was fun.
Yeah, it was a fun start to the season. It really was.
Yeah. Shall we swap over to Dalek Invasion of Earth then?
Yeah, I think that's the big one here.
Definitely a very important episode, because we will be saying goodbye to Susan at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's also Terry Nation's second Dalek story. He comes back, I think, later this season, and then next season, and then in the mid-70s afterwards.
Right. There was so many, like the first episode, the setup to everything was so good.
Yeah.
Like, I love how you really see like how much they've all grown traveling together as they first arrive here, and they're like, okay, seems like it's London. I don't think it's your time. This was a stark contrast to the Doctor's confidence from Reign of Terror of having brought them to the right place, because the Doctor's the one that's like, I don't feel confident that I brought you to the right time, so we better be careful. And I think it's really interesting to see how so much of the first episode is just them trying to figure out what's going on in a very small space before it really becomes much larger scaled.
And then, like they did in the first one, took it until the end of the first episode to actually show a Dalek.
Yep. There's something coming out of the water. Funny about the Dalek coming out of the water. Like, it shouldn't have been funny, but there was just something so funny about that to me. And then, of course, it never happens again. It was never a point again. I'm like, can the Daleks just go underwater?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they do explain that they don't need static electricity anymore by saying that, like, they have circles on their backs.
I do like that.
So
they talk about how like, they're different. Although, I don't like how they said, oh, these ones are from so much earlier. It's like, well, they shouldn't be more advanced if they're from earlier. If they're still the Daleks, but all right.
I mean, the Daleks kind of do that in Modern Who too.
They do.
Where like the reconnaissance Dalek can brainwash people.
That's true.
Steal people's bodies and stuff, and like that's from way in the past.
That's true. Those are like some of the first Daleks in that case. Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Apparently, they reused the original Dalek casings as well, and they just added 2 more.
Yeah,
they were doing this.
Yeah, like the Supreme Dalek.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I think the Supreme Dalek was actually a repainted old one, though.
Oh, okay.
I think. But yeah, they made 2 more and then used the 4 from the first episode.
Okay, that checks out.
It was also interesting that like the Robo-Men, like those are just Cybermen.
Yeah, that was a whole point I had here. Like the Robo-Men are literally just Cybermen. Like it's the idea of they did some sort of surgical treatment to captured people and made them into robots or androids, or primarily made them into people that were under their control and robotic. And like that's literally the Cybermen before the Cybermen. Even down to like the metallic thing on the head is what's doing it all. Yeah,
it's very interesting because like we also haven't seen Robo-Men in Modern Who at all. Probably just because we have Cybermen now.
Yeah,
I assume. They probably just decided.
Yeah, I definitely think that's to keep them distinct from, to keep Cybermen distinct from the Daleks, because I think otherwise it is too similar.
Yeah. I also found it interesting how, like, the plot is first the Daleks use a virus to wipe out humans, and that's what the humans were trying to do in the Sensorites.
Yep.
Which is a bit interesting. So they're very similar to humans in some ways.
It's come back full circle. But no, I think what's so interesting about, even from the beginning of the serial, is how dedicated they are to giving every one of our main characters something important to do. Like from the beginning. Even Susan has a bigger spotlight in this episode than she has in any others aside from maybe the Sensorites. From the beginning.
She kind of has to have a good scene here because she leaves. But
that's what I'm saying. Like it's good that she did, because otherwise it just would have been disappointing if even in her final episodes she didn't. But like she seems far more capable this episode, even from like the get-go, more willing to do things and less like a child. And I like that because I think it shows good growth for her. It's just a little silly seeing how sudden it feels if you're watching the episodes in order.
Yeah. I feel like making it be a romance that makes her leave is a little weird, especially because, like, how old is she now? She was 15 or 16 last season.
She's probably still around that, maybe 17. But the whole thing is kind of silly. But I don't think it's actually that bad, because I think it actually works for everything they already established about her character. What she wants, like for so long, she's talked about how she wants to belong somewhere. She wants to have a purpose somewhere. She doesn't want to just pass through somewhere, help out a little. She wants to be somewhere. And from the Aztecs, she wants to find someone that she actually cares about, not an arranged marriage or anything like that. She doesn't want to just be with someone. She wants to be with someone of her choosing. And this story did a great job giving her someone to attach to that wasn't like all of Barbara's crushes, where they very much felt like they shared a scene together, so obviously they got feelings for each other. And this actually, like you can see very quickly how, like, she like, if you told me that Susan and David were the Doctor's companions for this story, I'd believe it, because that's how it felt. David blended so well with them and worked really well with them, and you could see how he and Susan are bonding through all of this together too.
And then she mentions that, like, the idea of getting to rebuild a planet is very interesting to her. So it's also kind of why she wanted to stick around.
Yeah, like, I actually really like her reasonings for staying. Like, I actually think the build-up to all of that is done really well throughout this episode, or throughout this whole serial. And I'm grateful, because Susan needed that kind of win. Because for so many of our episodes here in our podcast, we've been talking about how Susan gets shafted this story, Susan gets shafted that story. Oh, they started to do something with Susan here, and it didn't really amount to anything. Okay. And I'm really glad she had a good end, because I think this was definitely her best story. But I think I have at the very bottom of my notes here, I think the fact that the last scene with her we get, she's just so dejected. The somber music playing and the looks on her face and the way she's moving along with David, to me, comes across like she didn't actually want this, she realized, but now has no choice but to go along with it. And I think that's sad.
Yeah, it is a little odd. I kind of feel like this idea, though, where the Doctor realizes, like, someone is a bit too addicted to traveling with him in the TARDIS, I feel like we should bring that back sometime. Because I feel like a lot of modern Who companions could have had that exact moment, and it would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really would have, instead of waiting until they die, or the Doctor dies and chooses to do something alone. We need natural companion exits. Like, I still firmly believe if Clara left the Doctor at the end of Series 8, where they both lied to each other, that would have been a fitting end for her story, actually. But, that kind of idea. But no, I think Susan had a really good end, and I think she had a really strong character here. I find it really funny that the Doctor left her with only one shoe, but
yeah, I made a note of that too.
it's just sad that her last scene comes across like, wait a minute, I don't want this, but I have it now, so I might as well make it work. And I think that's sad, honestly.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Also,
Doctor has a good speech there, though.
I noted here, I really liked this speech. Like, he's had a good few speeches already, or like short ones, but I really liked this speech. I just wish he followed through on the one day I shall come back.
Yeah. Well, apparently she does come back in a multi-Doctor serial down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And it is actually her after this point.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I had heard that she appears in one with the First Doctor, so I assumed it was before she left the First Doctor.
That's what I thought.
But no, it's actually like they're pulled from time, and then they all meet up.
Okay.
So it is actually her afterwards. So she shows up for, I think it's like the 20th anniversary special. So we'll get there eventually.
Was that the 3 Doctors or the 5 Doctors?
The 5 Doctors.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, we'll get there eventually. It'll be a while.
So,
but
yeah.
I think...
And they have had like books and stuff where they do meet up again. I think there was even one that was funny where it's like the Doctor comes back and meets her kid and then gives the kid a shoe and is like, hey, give this to your mother.
Oh my god. I finally fixed your shoe.
I finally fixed your shoe from 30 years ago.
God. That's really funny. No, I guess I'm happy she finally has a win for her character, but I'm a little sad about it because it doesn't really feel like a win in the end. Because she doesn't seem happy about it. But I don't know. Other than Susan, though, I think Barbara was the other star here, to be honest. Like, Ian kind of bumbled his way into every situation he got into and just kind of got lucky throughout a lot of it. Like, it's really funny for the character they set Ian up to be throughout the past couple seasons, like throughout all of season 1 and this one. He did not feel like that protagonist this time. He really just bumbled his way along. Whereas Barbara was constantly involved in plans and strategies and even like tried to trick the Daleks directly using her knowledge of history. And I love that you could see her coming up with it on the spot. And it was working.
She just pulls random names from history.
Yep. Because how would the Daleks know? So, and it was working. She just...
It was.
For some reason, played her hand way too quickly. Instead of waiting for more Daleks to leave the room.
And the woman that she was traveling with was actually intended to be Susan's replacement at one point in time.
Oh, really? They intended Jenny to replace her?
The character of Jenny, she was originally called Seda, I think is what her name was. Mm-hmm. But originally, the idea was that she would stow away on the TARDIS at the end. And then she would be their new companion. But they decided not to go with that because the end of this serial was the end of the current production block, so they weren't sure if they were going to get more stuff. So they didn't want to introduce a new companion in the final episode of the show. So they decided to dial her character back a little bit.
So would that mean this technically was like a season finale, even though it wasn't like projected as such? If it was the end of a production block?
Yeah, I guess kind of. Because like they even in like season 1, you know, they had Edge of Destruction was made because of the end of the production block, so it's just like... Right. They had multiple production blocks per season, sort of thing.
Because I was like, is this really... If you told me this was a season finale, like, I would believe it. This felt like a season finale. This feel like them re-encountering the Daleks this way, like, at the end of the season where they first encountered them, that makes perfect sense. So the fact that it isn't a season finale is actually surprising to me. It's the second episode of the story, or the second serial of the season.
Yeah, I mean, between season 1 and season 2, they only took like 6 weeks off, I think. Okay. So, like...
Not much.
There wasn't really that much of a difference.
Yeah.
Because I think it was September 13th, I think, was the end of season 1, and then October 31st was the start of season 2. So they didn't take much time off.
Yeah, I see.
I think the Daleks are very interesting in this, though, because, like, there's a lot of parts of them that we just don't see anymore. Like, there was the Robomen. One of them had a pet, which is very weird.
That
you don't think of Daleks as owning pets.
That was very strange. Because that was like a one scene thing, and then Ian killed it, and it really shouldn't have been funny, but the way they did it was honestly very funny.
Yeah.
It should not have been. I laughed and I like covered my mouth like I shouldn't be laughing. Like it shouldn't be funny. But it was kind of bad. Like what was it called? The
Yeah.
Slither? Something like that? Like
Yeah, Slither, I think.
like I could understand if it was like this weird like homunculus creature that the Daleks were making. Like just like some weird experiment. But like
Yeah.
no. It's just some other
The Dalek
weird
leader
danger
has a
the
pet.
Daleks brought with them, I guess.
Yeah. You don't think of Daleks as owning pets.
No.
But this one does, I guess.
Sure. Very early Daleks we got going on here.
Yeah.
I have
Apparently Terry Nation kind of changed Daleks a lot every time he brought them back.
That should be interesting as we see to go through and see what elements they specifically changed, got rid of, and what elements they specifically went out of their way to keep.
Yeah.
What do we think of the Daleks' goal, though? To remove the core of the Earth, to be able to pilot the planet.
It's a very silly thing. Apparently, it comes back with a Cyberman plot, though.
Oh, that's
like
funny.
the Cyberman's home planet has the same idea. But yeah, it's a weird thing. Like I think it would make a bit more sense if it was just like we're gonna puncture the core so that it destroys the planet.
Yeah, like if it was just to destroy it, I'd get it.
Kill everyone.
What's the point in piloting it?
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, like it's like when it's like, oh, we're gonna get to like you can kind of tell from the way the mine was depicted that they're, and especially when Ian was going down it, like okay, they're mining to the core of the Earth. Why? And then it's like, oh, we're gonna destroy the core. Oh, okay. No, we're gonna replace the core. I'm sorry, what?
It's just one of those silly sci-fi things.
Yeah,
I guess they just decided to have.
I also have noted here. I'm just kind of scrolling through like all my notes in the episode because there were a lot here, so I'm only looking for what's like worth saying here. But I noted there's a nice moment when it's the Doctor, Susan, David, and Tyler, and they're trying to get to the camp. I think they're still kind of in the sewers, but they're dealing with Robomen. First of all, I think it's really funny how the Doctor just smacks one of the Robomen with his cane a few times, and he's like proud of himself for it. But I love that he stops Tyler from shooting one of them. And has, like, not even a speech, just, like, a strong, confident statement of, I never take lives unless my own is threatened. And it's like, you know what? That's sticking to your ideals, and that sounds like the Doctor I know. That was good.
It's certainly a change from last season of the Doctor, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he almost murdered a caveman for no reason.
I will never forget that. Like, first episode Doctor was very different. But I think like the Doctor had like a lot of really good moments throughout this.
I also liked when he was like, "Never call me Doc. It's Doctor."
I have that noted here. Oh, Graham is in for quite the shock in 60 years.
Yeah, that was a funny moment.
But what I do have specifically noted is while Susan is like the spotlight character of like clearly getting the most focus in her development, I think Barbara's the other star here. Like Barbara, it's so solidified to me. Barbara's like on par with modern companions in terms of capabilities. Like she's actually
she really
incredible.
And apparently, also William Hartnell got hurt in this serial when he was coming off of the Dalek ship, he got hurt. So then the following episode, he wasn't in it much because he couldn't be. He needed to take a bit of a break.
Was that when he jumped out of the Dalek ship, yelled at Barbara like "get back," and then went back in the ship for some reason?
I think it was when somebody else was trying to like carry him out of the ship. I think when he got hurt, and then like the reason why they just kind of leave him behind, I guess, is because they couldn't film anything with him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they went back for him later.
That's probably why there was like a whole episode where he was mostly just in hiding that episode and talking with people and not really doing much. Yeah. No, Ian really did bumble his way through everything. I mean, sure, even if the fact that he hid in the bomb in the end, that's the only reason why everything was okay, because he happened to hide inside the bomb and then was able to jam.
It was so funny too. It's like, oh, there's a Dalek. I'm just going to hide in this thing right here. And it's like, it's the bomb.
All it needs to do is turn around to notice him, and it didn't do it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I did love, though, how many sets there were here, how much was outside, how many different locations they had here. Like, this reminded me of, like, Keys of Marinus, so, like, just how much, like, diverse areas they had and how many different sets they had. Like, it was quite nice for that. I really liked that.
Yeah. It seems like they kind of just decided they're going to spend a lot of their budget on Terry Nation episodes.
I mean, especially with how
Keys Marinus was also him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because the Daleks are very good, very popular. So obviously, the Dalek episode was going to have more money put into it.
Yeah.
They did it with Keys Marinus too, though. And it's also interesting just to see, like, the Daleks in, like, places where people would actually recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
If you know London.
Yeah, like on the bridge.
It's, like, actually outside. Apparently they used, like, tape to do, like, the Dalek writing on buildings and stuff. And they almost got in trouble for doing that.
Oh, wow. That's kind of funny.
Because, like, police officers came by and were like, why are you putting tape on this historic monument here? Don't do that.
Man. Imagine getting arrested because you're filming Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Man. But no,
And then at the end of the serial, too, there's the first person shot with the Dalek.
Yeah.
And if you notice, it sounds a bit different in that scene. And it sounds a lot more like what we're used to.
Yeah, it does.
Because the like sound effect they used on it is different, and that went on to become what they always use for Dalek voices.
Yeah,
which was interesting.
It's kind of neat.
I also like the very bad Dalek imitations that
Those
the Doctor.
Were so funny.
I think the Doctor and Barbara did.
The Doctor,
it was so funny.
I have noted here. I love the way Barbara and the Doctor had different ways of trying to sound like a Dalek to convince the Robomen. Although I think that went really, really fast. The transition from doing that to, the revolt was successful. That was really fast. But I did find it funny.
I feel like this one, again, has the issue of it didn't really stick to the landing because, like, the ending is just weird.
Yeah.
Like, everything building up to the ending was good, but then the ending is just, like, they're just defeated now.
I think the ending was a lot better than many others we've had, because at least they showed enough. Like, we see the spirit to revolt in a lot of people. All they need is the opportunity.
Yeah.
We saw the opportunity was given. We saw how it went. And then we had, like, the good farewell for Susan. It wasn't like a 1-minute scene. Like, it was a whole thing. So I think it could have been better, for sure. Like, it definitely wasn't the best end. But I do think it was one of the better ends to a serial that we've had thus far. And felt less rushed than many others have been, rather.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite scenes in all of this, though, was Barbara with some of the other resistance fighters just running across London. Just them trying to get to, I think it was to the museum. So, like, their stealth mission against the Daleks. I think that was just... that was the moment I realized that, like, they only got to do that because of how successful the show already was.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, have
and
them
then everybody
running
wanted
around...
Daleks back in
yeah, exactly. Them running around London and having the Daleks in London, they only got to do that because of how popular they were. And that was their first time really doing filming for the show, not in a studio, and not just random outside shots, but, like, very purposeful, this is the cast.
Yeah.
And I think that was excellent.
I think it was a fun serial as well.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
This might be one of my favorite serials we've had thus far, I will say. I really liked this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to do a good story with Daleks. At least the early ones were.
Yeah. I was going to say early days. Now in the modern days, you have the constant risk of overusing it, but that's different.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we have said goodbye to Susan now.
Yeah.
So.
A little sad.
I think my general thoughts on Susan as a character is that, like, she's an interesting character. They didn't do that much with her in general. It would have been nice to see a bit more done with her. But, like, I liked her.
Yeah, I'm glad I can say I liked her, but I do think she's an overall weak companion, which is sad because being the only, like, relative, like, blood relative to the Doctor really should have been a lot more special.
Yeah. Like, you can tell they weren't really thinking this show was going to go on for 60 years by doing that.
But that's why it's like, I wish
Especially
they
'cause-
revisited ideas with her, like, more in the
Yeah.
show, once it did go on more. But, I don't know.
Especially because, like, it's also funny because she wasn't even going to be the Doctor's granddaughter at first. And then they were just like, it'd be very weird for an old man to be traveling around with a teenager.
Yeah.
We should make them related. We should just do that.
Yeah.
And it was like the writer of An Unearthly Child came up with the idea that they were related.
That's good.
It's like, it's just a bit weird if an old man's just traveling with a teenager that he's not related to.
Yeah, you'd have to come up with a very convincing reason otherwise. So them being family is just a good one.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, my only gripe with Susan leaving, not even just that it came across sad, because I actually liked that, it was just sad, is that she didn't get to say goodbye to Ian and Barbara.
Yeah. And they kind of imply that the Doctor talked to Barbara and Ian about it.
I wish we got that.
Them leaving there.
I wish we got him like, talking to them.
Because Barbara's like pushing Ian into the TARDIS, basically, and saying like, we need to go.
It seemed like
the implication is they knew.
I think the implication there is the Doctor was like in the TARDIS, like beckoning them to come over, because before he shut the doors, it looked like he just finished having a serious conversation with them. So I think in the TARDIS he told them. But yeah, you're right. I did make note of that of Barbara beckoning to Caesar, or like kind of getting like Ian's like, okay, come on, we gotta go. And I'm like, I wonder why. But I think it's because the Doctor was going at that point to have the conversation with them about it. But I wish they were involved in it, because they are her teachers and like her friends. I feel like they would have had something to say about it.
Yeah.
But
I just find it so weird that like a romance was the idea that they went with. Like, I feel like you could have done a bit more to establish that like she actually wants to help the Earth rebuild and stuff, especially because like, Doctor, you don't really leave a teenager with someone that she has had a crush on for 2 days, because it might only last a week.
Yeah.
She's a teenager.
Exactly.
Crushes don't always last.
Exactly. And it's like, I wish it wasn't just the crush, because like being the crush and everything they went through together, like, all right, fine. But I wish it wasn't just that. She kept talking about how much she wanted to be involved in like fixing the planet and healing it and rebuilding it. And I wish the Doctor caught on to that as well. And in his speech to her, mentioned, I know you want to belong somewhere. You've made it abundantly clear that you want to belong somewhere. And while Coal Hill wasn't the place for you to belong, it was the place that made you want to belong. Here is a place where you can help and belong. Like, it just would have been nice to get something like that. Instead of just, you're a woman now, romance. It was a good speech, but that is kind of what it boiled down to.
It's ultimately a pretty decent ending for a companion, though.
It is.
Because, like, I don't like it. I don't like what they do in Modern Who, where they kill off the characters and then didn't actually kill them off and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sick of that. That's actually my favorite part of like, Chibnall's era, of the fact that they all just
they just
comfortably left. And that was such a relief.
Instead of having these tragic endings where you don't actually want to kill them, but you want to make it tragic.
Like, look, it's just pats the writers on the shoulder. It's okay. We can have another Adric here and there. It's okay. If you really want to find a way to bring the character back, it's a time travel show too. Like, you can kill them off. It's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I guess since we're talking about companions, we could also talk about the news that showed up.
That's true.
Which was that they did actually confirm that Varada Sethu is going to be in season 2, but they also confirmed Millie Gibson is going to stick around.
I'm so happy they finally said something, and I'm so glad all of the problems of the last few months just boiled down to stupid tabloid rumors.
Yeah. Because it sounds like the tabloids were just heard there's going to be a new companion, so they just assumed that meant the other one's leaving.
I think, from what I've seen of filming, I think what it is Millie is not in every single episode. There's at least 1 or 2 episodes that she's not in. And right around that same time, there was the filming with the new companion. So people piece that together. Oh God, she's out. the new one's in.
Russell T Davies did say though that like Ruby Sunday is still a major character.
Good.
So like she's going to be like on the TARDIS, I assume. It's not going to be like Martha in season 4. So he is still going to be a major character.
Yeah. I imagine she's still traveling. There just might be a point where like either she goes home for a little bit or she gets left behind. So like at home, like something happens and the Doctor has like 1 or 2 adventures without her, then comes back for her. But it is good to see confirmation of Varada Sethu. It was also great to see the pictures of them together, both companions and the Doctor. Yeah. Like, that confirmation that, like, yes, Millie's still here, Ruby Sunday's sticking around, we have 2 companions. I'm excited about it, but I really, really hope the rumors that Varada is not a modern-day companion is true.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Like,
personally, I think I like TARDIS teams more than 1 Doctor and 1 companion.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were watching Classico. I think I really like the idea of having like 3 different companions that all have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And then like Chris Chibnall's era, I also quite enjoyed having a whole team there. I know most other people didn't, but I did.
I love the idea of the TARDIS team. My issue with it during Chibnall's era is that there's quite a few scenes where it feels like, oh god, we have too many characters for this one scene, but we have to make sure they all say something. And it felt like ticking boxes of, did they talk? Check. Did they talk? Check. And I felt like there were so many scenes that would have been better if not everyone had to say something. So it was that was a case of, I think, you have to juggle all your characters well, and I don't think it always did, but I think when it did well. And I do think the Doctor works well having a team, but I like the fact that we can have great Doctor stories where it is just the Doctor and 1 companion, and then great stories where it's the Doctor and multiple companions. Because I do think some of our favorite Doctors, I think some of their best stories come from when they have multiple companions. Like, I love Series 10, which is not just with the Doctor and Bill, but also Nardole. Some of Christopher Eccleston's best stuff was with not just Rose, but also Jack. Like, together. Like, I think, like, having more than just a 1 companion can be really good.
Yeah. And then there also have been a lot of interviews that have been showing up. So there's, like, a lot of details.
Yeah.
That Russell T Davies and Ncuti Gatwa have been saying. Russell T Davies recently mentioned that The Timeless Child is going to be the spine of the show, which I definitely think is a good idea.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when they announced that Chris Chibnall was leaving, I was kind of annoyed at that because I thought, like, looking at how he handled The Timeless Child, I kind of figured the plan was 13th Doctor would learn about all this stuff, and then the 14th Doctor would be about, like, coming to terms with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seems like that is what is happening. Just Russell T Davies is handling that second part, and now it's 15th instead of 14th. But
I'm very glad that Russell T Davies is respecting what was, done before, because it would be very easy to new showrunner. Oh yeah, that stuff I can find a way to retcon that and write it the way I want to, and I'm so glad that's not what's happening, because I think The Timeless Child is such an interesting idea. I just wasn't a fan of how it was executed and how much there wasn't done with it before. But the fact that we're getting to explore more of it makes me so happy, because I think there's so much you can do with the idea. And I love the little idea too that was tossed around in the 60th that it all might be because of the toy maker messing with the Doctor's personal history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, I feel like that may not necessarily be the case, because the toy maker was released after Wild Blue Yonder.
Yeah, like, but he mentioned making a jigsaw of the Doctor's history, and I think that explains why there's like conflicting ideas behind who the Doctor is. Obviously, the Timeless Child is the one that's here now, but that might be why the Doctor, like, looking back on their history, has had different conflicting info. Like, the thing Stephen Moffat for some reason was a fan of poking fun at, of the Doctor being half human, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see how he's going to explore it. I'm kind of hesitant, though, because, like, I don't want answers.
Yeah,
I don't want any answers.
I want to see the Doctor dealing with it and like making his identity based on what he now knows about himself, rather than oh, I need answers, because the 13th Doctor was the time to get answers, and she chose not to get those answers. Let's not undo that.
I think I want like emotional exploration of it. I don't want like answer exploration of it.
Yeah.
That's my basic thoughts.
I don't want backstory. I want emotional development.
Ultimately, I don't like if he says like what the name of the planet the Doctor's from is from. Like, I don't care about that much. But it's like the idea of having these past Doctors is good because we don't know how many of them there are.
Yeah.
So I don't want to know, because then any future writer can just have a past Doctor show up anytime they want. And then, speaking of Daleks, Shudigatwa kind of implied he still doesn't know if he's ever going to see a Dalek. So that means 2 seasons without Daleks.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. We've had a bit too much Daleks in the modern era. A little bit, at least. I think it is good for them to take a bit of a break. But I would be shocked if Shudi goes the entire run without encountering a single Dalek. And I also imagine there's a chance of Shudi simply being coy about it. But also, I don't think
possible.
They haven't finished filming season 2 yet either. So.
Well, he said he has heard people saying, like, we're not sure if you're ever going to see them. And he's like, no, I have to fight a Dalek. What's the point of being the Doctor if I don't fight a Dalek? So that kind of implies that like none of the scripts for season 2 would even have a Dalek in them.
Interesting.
But he wants to fight one at some point. So
good.
One will probably show up at some point.
He better. Although it would be tragic if it stayed for his regeneration story, because that means he loses that battle.
Yeah. Personally, I liked Chris Chibnall's approach that he had for most of it, where it's just the Dalek is the holiday special, and that's it.
Yeah.
Although then they did also come into flux, but for the most part, it was just we have a special for Daleks.
They were very much a background element in Flux, though. They weren't like a key point. Like, they were not a key threat. I do like the idea of the Daleks are so special. You make them part of a special, whether it's a season finale special or a holiday special, because that's a very big deal. I think that is the best time to do them.
I think maybe you don't need to do it every year, but saving them like for the special instead of having them be the overarching season plot is probably a bit better than having them in every season.
Yeah. This does make me wonder how much of classic, not even just classic, but just anything before Shudi's era, monsters and aliens we'll be seeing.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to wonder about, because we don't really know.
Because I think every like new Doctor's first season / showrunner's first season is usually about bringing in new audiences. So normally when bringing in new audiences, you're not really dealing with the classics as much. Like, I loved that about Jodie's first season, is that it was like all new things. I actually really liked that. I thought that was really like cool, and it helped people acclimate to the idea of what Doctor Who is before throwing you in. All right, here's a Dalek, here's the Master, here's Cyberman.
Yeah.
I kind of want that kind of pacing again. I think like as someone who has gotten friends into Doctor Who over the years, I think Matt Smith's is actually kind of rough. How his first season has it has Daleks in like episode 3. But it does it does do a good job at getting new fans acclimated to it, because you have like Amy who doesn't understand why they're a threat, so the episode explains that. But you have Daleks, you have Silurians, like you kind of actually have a lot of classic things in it that it was a little overwhelming for new fans with those elements. So I hope that Shudi's first season is primarily newer things. And then second season is the one that really starts to go into some of the classic stuff.
I think it's also worth noting that, like, if you look at Russell T Davies' era, the villain of every season is either a Dalek or the Master.
Yep.
So, like, it would be nice to have new villains.
It's true.
He didn't really do that. Because season 1, 2, and 4, it was Daleks, and then season 3 and the specials was the Master.
Yep. That's very true.
It would be nice to have new villains and stuff.
It really would be, yeah.
theoretically, we don't know, like, is the Maestro the Master, or is the Maestro? Is that a misdirect?
I really
because the name's very similar.
Like, it would be so cool if she is the Master, but I really hope she isn't, because she's in the second episode of the season. We've had so much of the Master in the last 10 years of the show, to be honest. Please give the Master at least a 1-season break before bringing them back. That's too fast otherwise. I would be shocked if we don't deal with the Master at all in Ncudi's era after the hint in the 60th, in the giggle. But, like, 3 episodes later is just way too
what
soon.
You could even do is just, like, the Maestro isn't the Master, but when she gets defeated, she releases the Master.
You know what? I like. Having a tie to the Master, but not actually being the Master, I like that.
So it's like, when the Maestro is defeated in the final episode, then the Master gets released, and then next season the Master shows up.
Yeah, something like that.
Because, like, the hand that picked up the tooth did have, like, fingernail polish on it, so
true.
You could say that
it's
could
a
be the
Mrs.
Maestro. Maybe.
We'll have to see there. But no, I think everything we're seeing for Modern Who now, with new confirmation things for season 2 and news and interviews, and even just all the marketing they're doing. Like, Ncudi's like the cover of so many magazines right now, and I love it. Like, Doctor Who is getting put front and center with the marketing, and I think it's so good. And that's the Disney influence, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, they're certainly using a lot of that Disney money for marketing, for sure.
And I think it's important.
I did also find it funny too how Ncudi gave, I think it was like Entertainment Weekly, they did a video where he talked about all the doctors, and he said, like, my first time ever watching Doctor Who was with Robot Santa Clauses. It's like, the first time he watched Doctor Who, it was David Tennant, which is just funny to think about.
I mean, that was like
the Doctor is now that young.
Yeah.
And it's the writer from that time that is handling him.
Wild. Must be like a fan's dream come true in his eyes, to be honest, like in his shoes.
Yeah. Especially because he got to star next to David Tennant in his first episode.
And the fact that he was able to hold the spotlight was so good. Such a good testament to him. Anyway, I do have a question for you about, like, what we have with news and, the full confirmation of Varada Sethu and all that. And that's, if Varada Sethu is going to be a key companion now, so like at some point in season 2, because it may not just be episode 1. If she's a new companion that's going to be traveling around the Doctor and presumably present for key major plot details going on with the Timeless Child and Ruby's whole orphan backstory, where do you think she fits into this, Varada? Who, by the way, according to I think it's like the filming locations Twitter, like the Doctor Who filming locations Twitter that goes around and actually tries to see what they can behind the scenes. They've heard her name might be Belinda.
Interesting.
That was the name they heard yelled.
Yeah, I feel like it's difficult to come up with, like, how we think she's going to tie into it when we don't even know.
We don't even know the first season. Yeah.
So it's like, I find it difficult to really say that much about, like, what I think her character is going to be like when, like, we don't even know what's happening before she shows up. Right?
Well, that's what I mean, though. It's like, is she gonna be another orphan in the TARDIS? Is she gonna be like another, like another?
Doctor's just gonna collect orphans.
Yeah. The Doctor's just so inspired by Ruby's foster mother or adopted mother. So I'm gonna do the same thing. No, no, like
he kind of does that, anyways.
Yeah, he basically does. He collects strays.
Yep.
Like, is she gonna be another orphan? Is there gonna be, a reason she's running with them, or is she just like Jack or someone, like some other companion that gets involved, or like Dan, like that wants to be there with all of them? Doesn't necessarily tie into the bigger picture of it all, but it's just another person in the TARDIS in the middle of it all. I kind of hope it's that, personally, but
really, I feel like it kind of depends on, like, how much they get through the Timeless Child plot in season 1.
That's true.
Because by the time they get to season 2, they might not necessarily want to be dealing with it as much.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of depends how season 1 goes.
Yeah. I'm excited.
So it's kind of hard to speculate on that. Yeah.
It'll be quite some time until we get any more on that, because that's next year, and we haven't even started this year's stuff yet, but it'll be exciting.
We should probably also just mention that not this episode, but our next episode is going to be releasing on May 11th, which is when the new season is starting. Right. So we're just going to say this now, that while it's airing, we're not going to talk about the new Who episodes, but once the season is over, we will just talk about all of it in one episode.
Yep. So you guys won't get spoilers.
It's not too much. That way we can stay focused on the classic Who and then just have like a standalone episode where we just talk about the whole season.
Yeah.
Altogether.
Yeah, exactly. And that way you guys don't have to like you guys watching and listening, it won't be like, oh boy, classic episodes, but I'm not caught up on the new one, so let's watch half the podcast and then, oh no, spoilers, time to tune out. Like, you won't have to deal with that. We'll have a dedicated episode at the end of that season going through all of that. Because we are primarily still focused on the classics. It's just also fun to talk about what's new and Who.
But yeah, so this episode that you're listening to right now came out on the 27th. The next one will be on the 11th. And that episode 7 will be The Rescues, which is 2 episodes, and The Romans, which is 4 episodes. Ooh. In The Rescue, we're getting a new companion. I think her name is Vicky, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But yeah, she gets introduced there. If you would like to be able to watch live as we record that, we'll be recording it probably on May 4th. I guess that's Star Wars Day. So if you would like to join us as we're doing that, you can join our Patreon to get into our Discord, where there is a lower tier where you just get into the Discord and you will have early access to episodes. And then there's a higher tier where you'll be able to watch live as we record, and we'll have like a live text chat that will chat with you if you're in here. So as a reminder, we just make sure to watch The Rescue and The Romans before our next episode. And you can find those serials on BBC iPlayer or for free on Tubi TV. And if you support us on Patreon for just $1 a month, you gain access to our Discord, as well as early access to episodes. I have been Joy. You can find me on social media at JoyContent.
And I've been Triss. You can find me on social media at ToonTriss.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.